Welcome to another episode of No Nonsense. I'm Pamela Wallin. Today, I'm joined by founder and CEO of FarmLead, Brennan Turner. Started in 2013, FarmLead is an online grain marketplace that changes the way farmers sell grain across North America by bringing them directly into contact with buyers, verified buyers. FarmLead aims to facilitate greater efficiency and transparency in the whole grain marketing business. Now, Brennan is from Foam Lake, Saskatchewan, which is extremely close to Wadena, Saskatchewan. So we are neighbors and live right across the lake from each other. Prior to founding this company called FarmLead, Brennan received his BA in economics from Yale University, that is nowhere near Wadena or Foam Lake, and he subsequently played professional hockey, also not in Saskatchewan. So, Brennan, the real reason you're here today is, of course, because you're from Foam Lake.
Yeah.
And I'm from Wadena, which is the center of the universe. You're just across the way from the center of the universe. Nearby.
We live in the shadows of Wadena. Or maybe it's the other way around.
Maybe it's the other way
depending
around.
who you talk to.
But it's an interesting story. So, boy from Foam Lake. These are small towns, right? Yep. My town's 1,500. Yours is what? Maybe 1,300?
1,200, 1,500. Depends
exactly.
on the time of the year.
Yes, it depends on whether the farmers are in or out. So off to Yale and pro hockey and Wall Street. Tell us just a bit about the path.
Yeah, I mean, it's you're bringing me back to my glory days here, but I played hockey first at the Athlone College of Notre Dame in Wilcox, right. Saskatchewan, the famous Notre Dame Hounds, and it's such a marked time on my kind of growth and as an individual and character and whatnot. And then, had the very significantly fortunate opportunity to go to Yale University. Like a dummy, I dropped out. No, but the way that I kind of negotiated my contract was to pay for my remaining classes that I did in the summertime. So I got my degree in economics from Yale while I was part of first the Blackhawks organization in Chicago and then the Ottawa Senators organization, and was part of the team in 2011 that won an AHL Calder Cup. So that was pretty cool. And then played one last year in Europe, in Scotland, which was a lot of fun and a great experience. And then that was kind of when the wheat board was kind of moving out. And my family we're fairly large farmers in Saskatchewan, between Foam Lake and then on the other side down in Frontier, southwestern corner. And aggregately this year we put in just over 55,000 acres of crop.
Okay, that's serious.
Yeah, so it's not small potatoes. And I'd spent some time on Wall Street in the commodity trade, and with the wheat board going out the door and having the opportunity to kind of sell to whoever you want, and knowing that we were using technology on the farms a lot more and more and more and more, and I mean that trend does not reverse itself. I do not think it will reverse itself.
That's that's, sorry to interrupt, but that's the thing that people don't understand. I mean, when you go to buy a combine or a piece of equipment now, it's $1 million.
Yeah.
It's got enough computer technology on it that, you could go to Mars and back. Like, this is not the little old farmers with the tractors and the straw hat. It's a whole other world. No,
and I tell some of my buddies in New York City that there are more screens and tractors and combines that we use than on the trading desk that you have. It's the amazing technology that's used today, and even some of the technology that's coming up through the pipeline in terms of autonomous equipment. Which is obviously, try to mitigate some of the labor issues that we see in agriculture. Right. You're talking about precision agriculture in terms of not just blanketing a field with all the fertilizer and maybe chemical as possible, but being very hyper specific, and that has reduced the crop input costs across the board, I think, substantially, and will continue to do so as we kind of see some of the evolutions of these first age or first generation technologies evolve. So, I mean, the farmer today is probably, unbeknownst to probably a lot of the consumers, one of the most technologically advanced individuals in the workforce.
Yeah. This is the thing that, you talk to guys like Murad Al-Khatib and how he's operating in the world, how you're operating in the world. This is not that scene that people have and struggling little farmers getting up at 4 a.m. Yes, they're still getting up at 4 a.m. But this is now such a big business. We all watch when things like the decision from China to cut our canola exports, something we grow a lot of in Saskatchewan. That's a big issue, and therefore farmers actually have to know what's going on in the world in addition to the high-tech requirements that are there. It's understanding you're in a global play, in a global market.
Yeah, and I think that the other fact to consider is that to your point, we can't just react as soon as something happens, right? Like we've bought the canola seed, so it's not like we can not plant a crop per se. Like we can make that decision next year, but the reality is that we only plant one crop a year.
Yeah,
and so when we make that decision, well, there are some agronomy reasons. We know that it's good for our soil health to rotate the crop and not just grow wheat canola, but we grow things like peas and lentils and malt barley that for all of us that enjoy beer get to experience. Oats. There's basically 14 different crop types that we grow across all the acres on my family's farm. And that being said, again, we make that decision based on the information available to at that moment. Yeah. And so as disruptions in trade or logistics, as we've seen historically here, specifically this past year, that puts a real burden on how do I think about making a profit? How do I guarantee that I'm going to have a margin this year? And it's good that we have a little bit of low interest rate environments that we're seeing right now, but given all the different challenges that farmers are facing, I think from a trade perspective, and even we talk about the carbon tax a little bit.
Right.
It puts us at a little bit of a disadvantage.
For sure.
I should say a little bit. It's a lot. It's a big disadvantage.
It's a big disadvantage. When I talked to my neighbors about that and the increase in the carbon tax that went ahead on April 1 in the middle of COVID crazy, I mean, that was a big hit. They were all drying grain from last year.
Yep.
That's a very energy intensive process, and it was costing guys $800 for a weekend's worth of drying, just the carbon tax on their bill.
Yeah, I mean, I quickly polled the family, I don't know how long ago, and our grain drying costs this year went up anywhere between $4,000 to $15,000, depending on the farm, a specific member of my family, and there's farms obviously bigger than that, and this, it's not like a decision that we make, right? We don't have the option to decide to dry grain. I mean, we do, I guess, have the option to not dry it.
Yeah, but just let it rot.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. And so the question is, are we going to continue to, be taxed on the purpose of trying to deliver a best in the world, best in class product in terms of the wheat that we grow, the malt barley that we grow, the canola that we grow, the list goes on and on. Or do we say, this is a function of the environment that farmers have to deal with every year, and so much like you could say the greenhouses of Eastern Canada are exempt, why shouldn't we also be exempt?
Exactly.
It's not like the greenhouses decide that it's going to be cold or hot. Right? We don't decide if it's going to rain on our crop as soon as we're ready to harvest it, and that's why we have to dry the grain.
And it surprises me because there's so much discussion always, and particularly in the context of the environmental issues, of us being still the breadbasket of the world and the importance of food security. We heard it again in the COVID context. I was traveling to India a few years ago, and it was stunning to me because you go across that country and you're going into cities of, 20, 30 million people that nobody have ever, we haven't heard of them. And we went to a legislature there, and I was introduced as a senator from Saskatchewan, and there was applause. And afterwards, people came over, and this fellow was speaking through a translator, and he said, "You feed our people. We eat your lentils." And he knew Saskatchewan, and he knew that we were indeed feeding. We don't even have that recognition here of how key we are to the cycle, to the system.
Yeah, and I think there are some initiatives that have been recently introduced to kind of like promote not only the sustainability of Canadian farmers and those from Saskatchewan included, but also just our production practices, how dramatically they've changed over the last number of years. Like, I mean, we talked about technology, right? It's no longer a straw hat and overalls, right? We're talking about pieces of equipment that are millions of dollars, that are guided by GPS, and we don't have to necessarily drive. We do have to perform and make sure that they are optimized and performing the way they should. But we produce a heck of a lot of grain with a very little amount of crop inputs, fertilizer, chemical, much less than we did 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago even. And as a result, our soil health actually, just across Canada and included in Saskatchewan, is much better for it.
Yeah, you don't have to just even summer follow to the same degree we used to.
I mean, how is it that we're able to produce more than we were 20 years ago while using less crop inputs, right? So there's various stories, and that's part of my purpose, I guess, in starting our company specifically was to kind of try to shine some light on some of these different production practices, no tillage, for example, right? Maybe showcasing that even if you're an organic farmer or maybe you're transitioning, we want to be able to promote that to not just different buyers of those specific products that you're producing, but also the consumers who might be consuming it. So, sharing this information up the value chain into the Loblaws of the world, the Publix in the U.S., the General Mills, and these various institutions that a lot of consumers trust today because of their simplicity and low cost food. And I think that's the next wave that we're going to see in the relationship between consumers and farmers is more understanding of really those production practices, and that yes, farmers are a net sustainable, they are a net carbon sink player in the ecosystem.
So when did the penny drop about FarmLead? About okay, let's figure out a way for producers and consumers or buyers to connect.
Yeah, well, I think it was going on for a while because we probably had a few too many barley sandwiches down at Fishing Lake, which we both share a cabin on, and talking about the markets and talking about the environment. Me coming from a Wall Street commodity trade perspective and understanding, there's a lot of overlap in what I see in my world to what my family's experiencing on the farm in terms of trying to sell their grain and frankly not necessarily getting the big picture. And so I started to write a little bit of commentary. It's called the FarmLead Breakfast Brief, to talk basically just to my family members, to give them bigger context of you need to be aware of some of these black seed producers because they're competition. Right. You need to be understanding of what is being produced in Australia and maybe some of those trade agreements. And what started with just family members kind of reading it and giving me perspective on it turned today, I think we have now over 60,000 readers globally. Wow. And it's a free commentary. I write it about 3 times a week, usually Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And, it's syndicated in a lot of different small town publications across Western Canada and the U.S. Northern Plains. The bottom line is to give that bigger perspective. And as we started to kind of dig into that understanding of, okay, this is what's moving the markets, it was then becoming a question of how do we time this properly to sell our grain at the best possible value at the best possible time. And to do that was a large opportunity cost in terms of the amount of phone calls that we had to make or take from grain buyers. Many times it was, no, this price doesn't make sense to me, and I just wasted 10 or 15 minutes when I was in the middle of fixing something in the shop, right? And so we started FarmLead to really provide a mechanism for farmers to easily share their expectations in terms of what they think they're willing to sell their grain for next. And being realistic, right? I mean, the price for canola, it's not $20 a bushel; it's actually 10. So, you get laughed out the door by any grain buyer if you came to them with a $20 a bushel price expectation. But easily being able to share that information and those expectations, as well as those quality parameters that I talked about, and then on the flip side, allow buyers to easily communicate with various types of farmers in a very systematic way, whether it be just chat through our mobile app or the website, or even making a phone call directly through our platform. You
got to make sure that the buyers that are out there, you've kind of done the check.
Yeah,
they're for real. They're not. It's not some black market thing that's going on here. Yeah.
No, so I'm a nerd, put simply. Again, an economics degree from Yale. I was a couple credits short of a physics minor.
Whoa. And a hockey.
And a hockey guy,
this
right?
This is
crazy. And so I wrote a bit of a credit risk equation or algorithm, if you will, and we partnered with a global company called Dun & Bradstreet, D&B, as they're also known. Yep. To help understand, okay, the buyers on our platform, are they legit? Are they good? Can they pay for the grain that they say they're buying on a monthly basis? And so we would only allowed those companies who did meet our credit requirements to get onto the system. And keep in mind that while we have Canadian Grain Commission licenses and bonds, there are a lot of different types of buyers that actually don't have to qualify for that, or they don't have to meet those requirements, especially on the feed side of things. And so we still provide the mechanism, and we provide a blue credit verified check mark next to all these companies that meet our requirements. But a lot of these instances, maybe a cattle rancher is just looking for a truckload of feed, and I've known him for 20 years.
Yeah,
he doesn't necessarily meet our credit requirements because he doesn't appear on Dun & Bradstreet's and lists, and they're not a CGC bonded company. But I know that John's good for the money with that truckload, and
he doesn't need A grade; he just needs whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And so our perspective is that we do not want to create any hurdles in terms of how you can engage and communicate with all of your trading partners, not necessarily just the big companies, but also maybe some of those neighborly trading partners that you've known for your whole life. And so between both those players and the big line companies, the big grain companies that you see with their big elevators around the prairies or even Western Canada or Canada for that matter, the point is to be able to have all of your trading partners kind of combined in one easy to access location. On the flip side, those buyers have all of their farmer customers combined in one simple tool, and they're able to see all those expectations. Because if I were to say, hey, I want to sell my next load of canola for $10 a bushel, right? A realistic price today, I would have to make 5 different phone calls to kind of set those expectations with all of my different buyers. I know that the price isn't $10 today, but it's giving them the indication, hey, when it gets closer to that, let's talk.
Right.
And on the flip side, there might be some other buyers that I haven't really done business with, but I'm going to give them a call anyways because they're outlier players and maybe they're a little bit further away, but they're still a player in my Rolodex of buyers that I want to deal with. And so instead of having to make all of those phone calls and literally repeating the same conversation over and over again, you set it once, and all of your buyers automatically are notified that, hey, these are the terms that we're going to
And it's
deal
on
with.
the app. You just take a look.
Exactly.
All the details of getting product to buyer A or B or C, wherever they may be, domestically or foreign, they make that arrangement themselves. You're not in that business.
Yeah, no, I mean, we know that these relationships have existed for years, if not decades, if not generations in some cases, right? And so, to say that we know exactly how to improve that relationship doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so we've removed literally every obstacle possible to make your cash grain trading life easier, but also manage those relationships and specifically the expectations therein. So, there's no fee to trade on the tool. There's no fee to get onto the tool. We do have premium services that, yes, you can upgrade for.
And pay some.
And pay a monthly fee for. But the bottom line is that our mission at FarmLead and our company is to make cash grain trade easier. And by using the different technologies that are already available, I mean, almost every farmer that are on our tools have a smartphone today, where they have obviously access to the internet, although that's a separate issue, internet infrastructure in rural areas.
At Fishing Lake?
Yeah.
Hello?
Oh, that's a battle. That's a battle. I'm almost ready to build my own tower.
Okay. Will you
Lake.
call me?
Yeah.
Because I'd like to be able to call the office once in a while and have a conversation.
It's a battle.
And get some internet. Okay.
And so yeah, I think at the end of the day, the technology's there, the relationships are already established,
Right.
but this process of exchanging information can be improved, and we've done that by a factor of at least 10x.
When I grew up in a household, not a farming household, but the family was in the business. Once the wheat board, so much of this seemed impossible with the wheat board in place, with those kinds of rules. Could you have done this before? I mean, technology aside, or is it just it's possible because of the technology, not because of government getting out of the way?
Yeah. So I mean, the question actually that you're asking is more of a systems question, right? Because if I'm a grain buyer and I know that I buy wheat, I buy barley, I buy canola, I buy oats, I buy any other crop, right? The point is that I have a process that I've mastered in terms of buying grain, and specifically wheat, that would go into a Canadian wheat board pool. Right. And for me to switch to something else when I know that wheat is one of the largest commodities that I buy by volume and the most amount of calls and interactions and farmers that I talk to, it wouldn't necessarily make sense. And so indeed, with the deregulation of the wheat board, it just really opened the door for an opportunity to kind of, again, combine all crop types, all different types of buyers on one location.
Okay, I just want to come back to an issue we touched on briefly earlier, if I can, on the whole food security issue. People talk about it. We are potentially, and by we I mean Saskatchewan, but also kind of Western Canada, we are really a key player in ensuring food security
Globally. Absolutely.
So when you see policies like discriminatory policies like carbon tax, like how do we make that argument? How do you make that argument when you're talking to people, which is, look, we're solving a global problem. Help us.
I think it starts with maybe alleviating some of the misconceptions about the farm today, right? We talked about a few of them here, and that we are no longer. I mean, farming absolutely is a lifestyle, but it is also a pretty intensive business, right? I mean, agribusiness accounts for, I think it's 2% of all Canadian GDP and 8% of the labor force. It's not insignificant. To kind of quote somebody that says it might be insignificant, and I think really what it comes down to is sharing some of the stories of our farms. Like these, we are not a corporate farm. Yes, okay, we have corporations for tax purposes,
right?
But 55,000 acres. It sounds like it's run by a corporate farm, but I've got 3 family members in Foam Lake, and I've got another 2 family members in Frontier, Saskatchewan. 3 family members in Frontier. There's 7 families basically that are running 55,000 acres
and living off it.
And living off of it, right? Some in some years we have had to get off-farm jobs, trucking grain for other people in order to kind of meet some of the requirements, the financial requirements of the farm. And I think that these stories about how we produce grain, how we've become more sustainable, how our soil health is very important to us, and we're not just planting the same crop over and over again. All these sort of messaging has to be shared up, and we know that in today's world of just information overload and instant gratification, it's a message that has to be repeated many times over. And I think it's not necessarily material for our Canadian fellow Canadian consumers necessarily in Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver, the urbanites, if you will, but it's also those for our customers abroad. Our malt barley buyers in Japan and our feed barley buyers in China and our canola buyers in Europe. More specifically, we've now opened the gateway to Europe to importing more canola because we meet their sustainability initiatives. And it's not like we weren't meeting them before. Right. It's just that we weren't telling anybody about it.
That we were.
Right? And so, again, this is why we're really focused on our company is sharing more information, not less, being transparent with our process, because we have nothing to hide in agriculture about how we do it.
Exactly.
That being said, of course, there's going to be bad apples, just like there are in anybody's listening. There's probably people in your office that you think is a bad apple.
Right.
It's the same way in our industry, unfortunately. And those tend to get the most press because the bad headline is always going to get the most clicks.
But I'm telling you, we went through this last year in the Senate. A piece of legislation came in front of us. It was about advertising to kids, but as somewhere in the page 40 of this particular bill was a statement that said wheat is unhealthy, bread is unhealthy. And you kind of look at people and go, what do you mean? Like, what kind of bread? Do you mean wheat? Like, how are we going to export a product if we declare a product to be unhealthy? This is within our own country, a country that should be aware of the kind of the farm to table process, because it's much more visible here than it is in other places.
Yeah, and I think what you're speaking to is the fact that we have 2 worlds of consumers.
Yeah.
We have consumers who have the benefit and the luxury of a low food cost environment where you're spending 10% of your disposable income on food, where in other countries that we export our grain to, Middle East, Asia markets, we're talking about or families that are spending 60 to 80% of their disposable income on food, right, just to live. And so this is why we have the optionality of agriculture. We have organic, we have non-GMO crops. For the record, there is no GMO wheat, there is no GMO oats, there is no GMO barley, right? And so, those sort of messaging, people understand. I think more so to the point is that if weed is bad for me, how am I able to get to the NHL, right? How
you are a case in point.
I mean, if I grew up probably eating more bread per pound of flesh than anybody else in Saskatchewan.
Breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Like I'm having a couple buns that just came out of the oven every time they come out of the oven, right? So, I think at the end of the day, it's easy to kind of poke holes, but if we pull back and kind of look at the forest and not the individual trees, what we produce relativized against any other producer in the world is best in class, best in the world. And this is why so many countries around the world not only buy from us, but also value our name. And that's why you're recognized in India and other places around the world for being from a very secure food producing region of the world.
What's the next thing that has to happen in agriculture?
Well, I think that's transparency and kind of line of sight into this food production is becoming more kind of commonplace. You're seeing blockchain beer production, right? So literally visibility on a blockchain, on a distributed ledger, from literally seeding the crop all the way to producing the beer and you drinking it.
Right.
You can take a screen or a photo of the QR code and literally see the entire story behind that. If you want. And there's a lot of people that are buying this specific beer because of the story behind it. They don't necessarily want to know all the details, but we should have these details available if they're available. So we're part of a couple different initiatives. I sit on the Canadian Roundtable of Sustainable Crops, and part of our efforts there is to promote various ways that we are being sustainable on the farm and saying, hey, these are the protocols, and these are the pieces of information that we want to share with our customers, both within Canada and abroad. We're also part of a really interesting group called CANE, which is kind of a transparency and traceability organization of a lot of different organizations, including TrustBix, which is the company that was behind the McDonald's beef traceability program.
Oh, okay.
So we're translating some of those different traceability dynamics that you've seen in livestock into the crop space, and you're probably going to see more of this messaging about, hey, learn more about what Brennan Turner's family in Founder of Saskatchewan did in terms of growing this wheat crop this year, or you enjoy this malt barley beer in your Pilsner, or as we call it in Saskatchewan, vitamin P. The point is that you're showing more to the story, and I think that that's what the consumer is really looking for more. They want to know, what are the values behind the farm? What are the values behind this company? What do they stand for?
Because they want to feel good.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we have all of this today. Yeah. We just have not been sharing it. And so my company, and through our platform Combine, as well as many others, I think are really trying to push this initiative. And it's I've been pleasantly surprised by the industry aggregately coming together and say, yes, we need to do more of this. We need to work together and not being so siloed in just focusing on, let me focus on my balance sheet and that's it.
I can't thank you enough for telling the story like this, because there's a real frustration when you come from Western Canada and when you're constantly trying to you've got the story, you've got the facts and figures. I really appreciate you being with us.
Well, thanks for having me, and at the same time, I mean, we're appreciative of you in terms of the stories that you tell and what you stand for as well in terms of giving us a name here in Ottawa.
Well, it's great. We're neighbors, Fishing
Exactly.
Lake. What can we say? Brennan, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of No Nonsense with Brennan Turner, the CEO of FarmLead, an online grain marketplace. Of course, he was a Yale graduate, as you heard, a professional hockey player, worked on Wall Street, and was named to Fast Company's list of most creative people. But most importantly, he's a good farm boy from Foam Lake, Saskatchewan, just across the lake. I'm Pamela Wallin. Thanks for being here.